Hello, my name is Terry Smith, and today we're going to be talking about the souls of black folks. W.E.B. Du Bois was born a free man in the northern part of the United States shortly after the Emancipation Proclamation of 1863. In his book, The Souls of Black Folks, Du Bois brings to the reader his disdain for the regulations and procedures African Americans went through following the Emancipation Proclamation. Written in 1903, The Souls of Black Folks delivers an unapologetic and unpolished perspective of the post-freedom lives of African Americans. Du Bois weighs in on several topics, including the idea of the double consciousness, his dissatisfaction with the American government, and his disagreeing with Booker T. Washington on his views of post-slavery life. Du Bois writes in detail that during his life he has found it at times to be difficult living as an African American because of living a double life. Du Bois writes, and I quote, "He simply wishes to make it possible for a man to be both a Negro and an American, without being cursed and spit upon by his fellows, without having the doors of opportunity closed roughly in his face." Du Bois is stating that he believes it is a person's right to be able to proudly be both black and American. This is one of the many issues covered in the book that still affects African American citizens of more modern times. Du Bois also tells a bit of the history of the post-slavery political processes that dictated the lives of millions of recently freed African Americans. Du Bois covers the Emancipation Proclamation and the following committee known as the Freedmen's Bureau and the disservice to African Americans both bits of legislation were guilty of. Du Bois questions the double standard of freedom with strict guidelines attached and brings to light the fault of most of the concepts developed and initiated by the federal government in the years following the Emancipation Proclamation. And what I mean there is the strict guidelines that were attached are, things like the Jim Crow laws, segregation, things of that nature. And the failure in the Freedmen's Bureau is, post-Emancipation Proclamation, a committee was formed of roughly 10 to 12 men to dictate the lives of a couple of million recently freed slaves. These failed policies of the time laid the groundwork for the hardships faced then by African Americans and the problems faced now by African Americans. Du Bois' delivery of a history of African Americans that many are not privy to in standard curriculum throughout the realm of education is enlightening and interesting to learn. Du Bois, in regards to Booker T. Washington, never just speaks ill of Booker T. Washington. He disagrees in a rather respectful way on most of Washington's opinions. Du Bois also, he says in regards to some of the social and economic views of Washington, and I quote, "He insists on thrift and self-respect, but at the same time counsels a silent submission to civic inferiority, such as is bound to sap the manhood of any race in the long run." Du Bois does not make it a point to outright villainize Booker T. Washington, but does repeatedly accuse him of perpetuating the idea of white superiority over black lives. This often comes across as much too harsh and in itself shows my only criticism of the book here, that W.E.B. Du Bois also may allow himself to lack the empathy and understanding that he calls for repeatedly in the literature. Du Bois was an Ivy League graduate who lived as a free man his entire life, whereas Washington was born a slave who lived through and experienced the good and bad of the effects of Emancipation Proclamation firsthand. The seemingly ultimate difference in the two men was Washington was happy with the change in the livelihoods of African Americans, even considering the parameters that went with the change, while Du Bois saw no reason to stifle the free black people from higher education and a higher consciousness than was allotted to them at the time. In conclusion, The Souls of Black Folks is an outstanding read and is a must for anyone looking to expand their knowledge in a few different areas of American history and several different areas of African American history. As stated before, Du Bois provides readers with his thoughts on post-slavery living for African Americans in a well-educated manner that expands in great detail the history and suffering of African Americans.